as an expert in economic development with no nonsense applied approach based on solid research. Again, we're honored to have you. And as you can see, students, this conference will be in English. And as you may notice as well, I'm going to ask everyone that can to turn on your cameras, okay? Please turn on your cameras for due respect for our guest speaker. I will ask you to turn on your cameras if possible. As you may see, Dr. Hewick, it might be difficult for some students because their connectivity is not very good. Mm-hmm. And we're at the mountains. You've been to La Paz probably several times, and so you can understand that, and also our internet capabilities are limited. But I'm gonna ask almost everyone that can to please turn on your cameras. Please turn on your cameras if possible. Okay, thank you very much. And as you can see also, I mean, you have been throughout your life as professional and entrepreneur since you founded more than 2 entities, and you're currently president and co-founder of at least 2, you know, very well-respected, well-known companies. So we're, again, very happy to have you here.
Well, my pleasure to be with you. Did we get Jeffrey to join? Do we have him, Dr. Sachs? Did you admit him yet?
We're not able to. I'm trying to do a search. If Anita can help me, Anita. I'm not seeing him. I don't see, I'm searching by his last name, but I don't see anything spelled out S-A-C-H.
S. There's an S on the end, S-A-C-H-S?
Yes, that's correct. But yeah. There's...
Jeffrey, Columbia University. I'm not sure how he's logging in.
Do you have his WhatsApp? Are you able to send him a chat message?
Email? No, not without going out of here.
Okay.
Oops, no, that's not him. If it is, he's grown a beard on us.
Not really.
No, there was a gentleman that came on just a moment ago.
Yeah, we can all search for him.
Okay.
But I'm not seeing him.
Okay.
In the...
Well, I don't dare go off my computer and then try to connect to his office because I might lose you. So hopefully, when he comes in, feel free, please, to notify me, and I'll stop where I am so that we can listen to Dr. Sachs. As I say, he's much more important than I am, and I think can contribute a lot to your program. So if you would like.
And thank you very much for allowing Mr. Sachs, Dr. Sachs, to join us, even if it's for 3 minutes.
Well, we hope that we can get him on here very shortly. Okay, what I'll do if your students are all with us, and I think I see 155 participants on my screen showing.
That's correct.
What I had entitled my talk today was Entrepreneurship, Evolution, Epidemics, and Expectations. So my whole objective is to share a little bit of my entrepreneurial story. I'm no expert in anything. I want to state that from the beginning. But I've had a lot of fun and I've learned a lot. And at age 77, I hope I'm still learning. So I want to share some of those bits of my story. I also would hope that through that story, I can motivate and inspire the young people of Bolivia. And I guess my message in that motivation, inspiration, is that don't be afraid of numbers. I started my career back in the 1960s. Gosh, seems like a long time ago. But I love numbers and I loved thinking with numbers. And I hope that they will pick up on that. And I'd like to share some, from my visits to Bolivia and my interest in Bolivia, some things that I hope will help you folks look at new opportunities for an entrepreneurial career. So I wanted to open, and this is where I hoped Dr. Sachs would be with us. Back in 2020, last year, Dr. Sachs wrote a book called Globalization, Geography, Technology, and Institutions. And I don't know if you can see it there, a little plug for Jeffrey.
Yes, we can see it.
Yes,
Yes, we can see it.
Anyone that's involved in teaching in any economic or business program, highly recommend you put it on the list. Basically, I've gone through it twice, maybe 3 times now. And what I see is he's talking about an historical perspective on how humans have interacted with their land, with their tools, and with each other. And he does this by taking us through our human history from 90,000 years ago in Paleolithic times to today, into the digital age. And what I found very interesting is that the timeline of each age has dropped and dropped and dropped. So we started off in the Paleolithic time. You know, it took us about 60,000 years to get away from being hunters and gatherers. We used stone tools, and we basically started to migrate, to disperse out of Africa, up into Europe, into the East, across the, into North and South America. But we were dealing with ourselves. So there was no civilization. We were independent economic drivers. Then we went to the Sachs's second age. We started farming, and we were farmers really up, and humans up until the Industrial Revolution. But we'd go through different stages. We went through the bronze and copper stage. Then in about just before Christ, about 3,000 years, we discovered the wheel. We discovered horses. And that period of time, the third, lasted about 2,000 years. So we've gone from 60 to 7 to 2,000. Then we got into the classical age. The classical age lasting from just around Christ until about 1,500 years. But we dropped from 2,000 years to 1,000 years. And then we hit the mid-1500s after death, 300 years where we were involved in global navigation. So we have the exploration of North and South America. Then comes along the industrial age. Sachs has defined that for us between 1800 and 2000. Now we're down to 200 years of this age. Of course, driven by steam, textiles, the steel industry, and that lasted until about 1960. Then we're into the computer age, and today, 2000 onward, into the digital age. And that's what I really want to focus on today. I want to take us deeper into the industrial age and to try to understand where entrepreneurship as we know it today, where did it come from? So I came up with a little quote that before today's multinationals, there were entrepreneurs. Before the Industrial Revolution, there was entrepreneurs. Before Enlightenment, there were entrepreneurs. Before the Roman, Greek, and China empires, there was entrepreneurs. Before Neolithic man, there were entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs is simply anyone who undertakes and attempts to create something. But we look at it, and here's the strange part. In all of these years, entrepreneurship, as we know it, really didn't get kicked off until Frederick Taylor wrote his Principles of Scientific Measurement, or Management, which was basically in about 1911 that it was published, but it was focusing on growing companies more efficiently. Entrepreneurship was mentioned. We always talk about the entrepreneurs, but it wasn't until 1947 that the world ever had its first entrepreneurial course. And that was done with Harvard, through Harvard, and it was set up for the returning vets. We had this tremendous supply of labor coming off World War II, and industry couldn't take them all. So we decided, or they decided, well, we've got to make entrepreneurship into a profession, and we'll start by offering the first courses. Well, those first courses, even after I was born, have today in the United States accounted for about 261 degree granting bachelor's degrees programs. So you can get Bachelor of Entrepreneurship in 261 universities. Interesting to me is that when we look at the MBA programs, there's over 1,020 some odd. Now, why is the bachelor's level only 1/5 of the master's level? And think about that for a while. Well, the good thinking of most of these programs is that you need at least 2 to 3 to 4 years of some sort of experience to really benefit from a master's in entrepreneurship. You need to refine, particularly not your tech skills, but your social skills, and more importantly, I think to entrepreneurship, the conceptual skills of understanding how all the things have to come together and form some sort of a whole. So I'd like to move from there into back a little bit and looking at what the Industrial Revolution created as far as disruptions, but out of those disruptions grew opportunities. So we see stage 1 of the Industrial Revolution. We're now in the 4th. And I'm going to venture a little bit where we may go, but let me start with the first. We had the development of machines to replace labor, manual labor. So we have the steam engine. The steam engine drove transportation, it drove factories. It was a machine taking over from people. The disruption from that is that people had to move from rural to urban settings in order to work find jobs in the factories. Well, that created a tremendous opportunity for the housing industry. So our first stage lasts from about late 1700s to early 1900. Then we discovered automation. That is, how do we get this machine to drive this machine, to drive this machine, all without steam, but now with electricity. So we have electricity as the new catalyst, taking over from steam, and the creation of the factory process of creating such things as automobiles. And the automobile was a major turnaround in the Industrial Revolution. That automobile that disrupted everything created a need for roads, a need for bridges, a need for hotels and motels as people traveled. A whole infrastructure was created from that. Then we get into the third, which we're now into 1960 after World War II. We have the returning of our vets. We have the war really decided, or the outcome of the war so manipulated, and maybe that's the wrong word, so influenced by some little thing called the birth of a computer, getting something to diagnose numbers, bringing all these numbers together, coming to some sort of conclusion. So that kicked off our information and computer age, lasting from about 1960 to about 2000. We had the birth, the catalyst was really the integrated circuit. And then from the integrated circuit, we went to the internet. And that was a major turning point in what I call the birth of the knowledge economy. The Great Epidemic, which, by the way, I in my mind, forever what it's worth, is a disease that affects a community. And the epidemic was those countries, those nations that decided to focus on this, to focus on education and science, while other nations remained in the industrial and the agricultural economy. And that was the great divide, the great epidemic. And we look at the advancement of those countries from then to today. And knowledge becomes, we go from agricultural to industrial to a knowledge economy. That knowledge economy separates the haves from the have-nots, the developed from the undeveloped. And one of the things that we see there is if knowledge is our disruptor, then the rise of private education. And if we look at the growth of private versus public education in those advanced countries, and you know, I look at countries like your own, Bolivia. You have, I believe, if I'm, you know, I should be in the ballpark anyhow, about 10 universities that are public, but you have 23 that are private. The United States, the very same, although they have 1,700 public institutions, they have more than 2,500 private institutions. So a growth of a whole new sector. Where that's going to be, you know, after COVID is a good question, but there's some major changes there. But this whole concept of knowledge economy, I believe it was KPMG last year, they did a study that basically looked at how we have grown and what factors in our global economy. And what they found is, well, between 1970 and 2015, population growth was about 1.9 times, fairly substantial. Real GDP growth was 3.6 times. But advanced education grew at 6.1 times, more than 3 times what the population has done. So the shift was over to education. So here we are now. If we look at that opportunity, and I think there's still great opportunities in the education, but it's going to take an entirely pivot, a different pivot into much more practical education, practical skills, technical skills, and a shift away from the theoretical knowledge that so many, particularly in Europe, I've been at 4 or 5 universities there, and it's still terribly theoretically based. But now we're into the digital age, 2000, 20 years. Catalyst has been taking the data that we've had and the speed that we're able to process it and use it. So data has been the greatest disruptor, the speed of that data in particular. And what that has created is a new business model. So if we look at the business models just going through the Industrial Revolution, in IR1, and when I talk about business models, I mean coming up with a product, finding the client that has the need for that product or service, figuring out your distribution system to them, and then pricing it in such a way that we can make a living, make a profit, whatever our goals on the financial side are. Back in IR1, you had about 30 to 40 years to come up with and refine that business model to do those things. By the second stage of the Industrial Revolution, that dropped from 20 to 25 years. By the time we introduced computers, that had been a 15 to 25-year window of opportunity. Today, it's 2 to 5 years because of how fast things are changing. And if we're not part of it, we're going to get left behind. So I'm going to go down and make a projection that, you know, everybody's got this question mark of 2000 to when. I'm going to say we've got 5 years before we've got to come up with the next age. And I'm going to call it the adjustment age, because I sense that there is a great catching up in all countries around the world. We're seeing increased civil unrest in country after country and country, primarily due to inequalities. Inequalities, particularly in wealth. We're seeing it in gender. We're certainly seeing it in race. Just as an example of those inequalities, and it's kind of scary. We look back to, you know, the 1960s, the United States, because that's where we get most of our data, had about 12 billionaires. 12, 1 dozen. By 2020, they were 650 billionaires. Totally in the world, about 22,100, so about a third of them. They control about 60% of the 2,100 in the world, control 60%, 2,100 people out of 7.8 billion people control 60% of the wealth. If we take the top 1%, we hear that slogan all over, just the top 1% of the wealth, people with wealth in the world control over 43%. And that's scary. If we look back, as a matter of fact, and Jeffrey Sachs, and I hope he's going to be able to join us, last week had an article out. And just looking at March of 2020 to March of 2021, those billionaires in the United States increased their wealth from just under 3 trillion to over 4.4 trillion, over 25% in 1 year. So people see this inequality and they're getting upset, and reasonably so. If you take, you know, the average worker from 1960 to the to 2015, their wages only went up, according to the International Labor Organization, about 12%. CEOs getting there through their knowledge economy, same time period, their wages went up 1,081%. So you have this extreme. Is there a solution? Sure there is. And I wish Dr. Sachs was with us, that he could talk about the need for sustainable development and creating policies that are going to allow us and start working towards those. While I'm
looking for him, but he's not been able to join us yet.
Okay. Well, I'm open anytime he comes in. You interrupt me. What I want to look at now is, okay, we're in the digital age. Yes, there are some very positive things that have happened as a result of this huge increase in our capability of using information. We have greater social connectivity than any time in our life. We have faster detection of all illnesses. So many of them, can be diagnosed because we can manipulate and look at different aspects of data. We have cheaper global communication. We have online education, which in a period of time like COVID right now, yes, there's some good and there's some bad. At least we're getting some sort of a message out to our people. We have cashless transactions. We have this wonderful thing called GPS. And I think to a country like Bolivia, it has major applications to the agricultural industry. I have a farm. In 2 weeks, I'm going to be pulling my tractors and planters into my fields, and I'm relying on GPS to map my fields, to help me monitor what I'm doing. I pull in, I press some buttons on the computer, it draws me that field. I take my hands off the steering wheel and it takes over the tractor. But not only that, it takes over the planter. I'm planting 18 rows of corn at a time. It's got sensors on the planter that are telling me, need to drop more nitrogen here, more potassium here, some phosphorus here, or it gives me a perfect formula for growing that particular seed to its maximum potential. So it's monitoring everything. And the same when I harvest in the fall, I come in, my harvester is then reading the land, how much nitrogen, potassium, potash were depleted during that growth, tells me if I need to after I finish harvesting, if I need to put some stuff down there for next year. So some great things. But at the same time, I really believe that the digital age that we're in has created some major problems. Number one, cybercrime. In 2021, it's estimated that cybercrime will be a $6 trillion component of our economy. Take that, our total global economy is about 90 trillion. So we're over almost 7% just from cybercrime alone. Another major problem I'm finding with it, voter interference. Of course, you heard all about Donald and Trump, but not only in the US, it's been happening in France, in Germany, Ukraine, and in many, many countries around the world. People are able to manipulate data and create thought processes for those that are going to vote. We have with our young people, we've got sex predators out there. We've got increased, unbelievable amount of bullying, particularly for those in their teens. A lot of stress is on them, and suicide is way up on our young people. But it's just not our young. Look at our seniors, discrimination. Not everybody has a smartphone. Not everybody, particularly in my age of 70 and over, have the skills to do all the things. And yet when retail and anybody else is telling us, well, just put the app on the phone and away you go. So there's a lot of discrimination with groups, indigenous people, older people. One of the biggest problems I have right now is ransomware. People come in and they take over your computer. And ransomware is to the extent that there's over 4,000 ransoms per day throughout the world. And the average settlement, they say, we'll take over your computer, delete this or change the data, play with anything we want. The average settlement is about $178,000 to settle a case. And universities, University of California last year, they were hit, as many, many universities were, but it comes to mind simply because they settled at 1.1 million, 1.14 million actually. Many universities are being hit, many private sectors. One of our biggest companies in our portfolio last year, December, was hit. We have also, on the negative side, a tremendous social disconnect within families. And I think that's major. It's a social thing that somehow we need to address. On the last thing I'd like to mention is generally global disruptions. And that has become the key word in the last year and a half, just not COVID, but what all the other disruptions have been. Now, interestingly, the leaders on the global research are our major accounting firms, Deloitte, KPMG, Ernst Young, PwC. And they brought out last month a study Deloitte did that talked about, what are the 7 major disruptors and what are the opportunities within it? Because I think any disruption is an indicator of a need, and the need is the basis of an opportunity. So they're telling us, well, technology is everywhere. There are now, we know we've got about 7.8 billion people in the world, but there's 6 billion smartphones. What's the potential there? Overuse, underuse, alternate use? I started off by saying I wanted to share the need for the students to really think about data. We have a tsunami of data hitting us today, 2021. We have 9 times more data than we did 2 years ago. 2 years ago, there's 9 times. What are you going to do with that? Another major change, when I came out of universities back in the 60s, you went to work for a company, you started in a junior position, middle management, senior management, and you stayed for 25, 30 years, and you retired with the same company. Today, people are needing to change their careers every 2.5 to 5 years. What does that require? What does that require on the skills that you have today that you're going to have to change? Those skill set every 5 years. And the way that you approach work is also going to be changing. And I think a huge opportunity in the contingent workforce, because we know that the contingent work, part-time project management, whatever term you'd prefer there, that about 40% of the people in our workforce in the advanced economies are part-time and project people. How can we get them together? How can we set up an agency of skill sets that we can move them, help them move from job to job? And how do we get ready for, artificial intelligence? Having those robots out there, which, by the way, the whole robot thing is amazing. Back when I was consulting in Asia, I knew that, in 2008 to 2000, the average cost of a robot was $500,000, $500,000. Today, it's $22,000. So the cost of that robot working day per day, shift per shift, never taking absenteeism, blah, 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 has fallen so much that we can rely on. And they are making, about 45 to 55% of our jobs very vulnerable, especially in anything that remains labor. So challenges there. I know that when I was asked to speak today, that they asked me to zero in on COVID-19. Yes, it is a huge disruption. No, I know nothing from a medical perspective. We've invested into one company in the last 2 years, just before the pandemic hit, on extending the life of vaccines through the cold chain management, which was a good decision at the time. It was a startup. We were looking for something in health sciences and everything that fit. The most important thing about the financing of young people today and young companies is finding that fit. Are they really coachable? Do they want to learn? Do they respect our knowledge, which is far more important that we bring to the table than money? So I look over the last 10 major pandemics, and we've been hit with many, many, many of them through history. But just let's look at the last few years. Let me go back to discovery of South America. By the time it was, in the late 1400s, the pandemic at the time, as it became known, was the Columbian Exchange. People from Europe came, and with them, they brought a lot of things, but most of all, they brought disease. They brought that they could live with. But within 50 years, 90% of the indigenous peoples in North and South America were wiped out. We go along, that was the late, by then, middle 1500s. We look at the plague. The plague hit and lasted for about 50 years. Let's hope that COVID doesn't. But that wiped out 15 million people. The Spanish flu at the end of Second World War wiped out over 50 million because, again, the interchange of people going all over the world fighting in the war. Then more recently, we had, of course, AIDS and HIV, 35 million people gone. And now here we are with COVID. COVID, we're just over 3 million people. And I love to say that there's a new technology out there that's going to slow it down, but unfortunately, we're into our third wave. We're into all these new variants coming at us, and we really don't know how to manage them that well. So we've got a major situation. When I talk to entrepreneurs and COVID, you look at how it's affecting us. Well, the worst thing that can happen is, we lose our lives. And there's a lot, especially in developing countries, underdeveloped countries, that loss of life and loss of that person within their business ecosystem. Because it's just not the person, it's all of the agencies that must be involved. You've taken part out of it. We've had work interruptions. Obviously, it goes up and down. If we've got employees, we're going to have absenteeism that we can't do anything about because they must stay home. They lose income, we lose income. There's also opportunity cost loss where, I'm ready to start something new, and wait a minute, access to the resources I need to bring together, the materials, the manpower, the time, the space, the money, and the information, they're not available to me. So that opportunity is lost. And then, of course, we have the social pressures of isolation, distancing. We're really seeing it psychologically hit our young people, particularly not the pre-university, the high school students. That's such a tremendous learning experience, how to get along with each other and to play with each other. More importantly, and again, when I look at entrepreneurs, you have to look at, okay, the ecosystem. What do we work within and how is it affected? So let's take the the country itself, and call that our ecosystem. So we have things such as the major impact is going to be, and we've seen it and it was projected, is recessions. Back in Q3 of 2019, the IMF said, you know, the good old world here should keep clicking along at its normal 3.5%. So our outlook was 3.4%. And again, you know, we've been through recessions, and let's just look at those since World War II. We had 75 hit us, major global, 85 hit us, another major global, 1991 was a global, and then 2007 with the financial crisis. And if we look at those, and I always jokingly say, I look at business cycles as a waltz, da-da-da-dum, 8 years to go up, boom, down, da-da-da-dum, boom, da-da-da, and you put whatever tune you like to it. So, you know, 95 months on, 11 months off. We're going to see a little longer one. Projections, you know, and again, I'm going to the world. We were projecting 3.4, but now we're looking more realistically at, and actually at 2020, and we had a 3.5 loss. Now, optimistically, we're looking for a 5.5 rebound. I don't think we're going to quite get it. The advanced countries, you know, we took the biggest hit. We were projected to be 1.7. Now that 1.7 from 3.5 is because that big block of that includes Europe. Europe has been slow with technology. They've been slow in the whole third industrial revolution onward. So they're pulled down, the advanced countries, from about the 1.7. Have I lost people there? I got a funny thing on my computer here. Are everyone hearing me?
No, we're fine. We're fine.
Oh, good. Okay.
Just a student turned on her microphone accidentally.
Oh, okay. I'm, you know, jokingly, all my friends have said, Hewick is physical, not digital. So I always worry about what I'm doing here. I'm one of those seniors that really, you know, is a little bit behind the curve. So let me come back to this. You know, we have the world, as I say, we're hoping to be 3.4 up, we're 3.5 down. We hope to recover to 5 point. The advanced economies, we were 1.7, but we're going to be down most of everybody by 5%. We finished 2020, and we're projected only to be about 4.3 going ahead. The emerging countries, they're the little devils to watch. They were projected to grow at 4.6%. They only went down 2.4. Of that, of course, the lion is China. China ended 2020 at plus 2.3. The world's down 3.5, but they're up. Last week, they brought their they're calling it post-COVID announcement out, and actually said they are ahead 18.3%. 18.3%. When I was over there in the early 2000s, I spoke at an APEC conference, and I had the opportunity to sit down one-on-one with their Minister of Industry and Development. And he was showing me their historical records that had never really been, and they had double digits for years upon years. Then they slowed a little bit, but watch out, 2030, before they're going to be way, way ahead. Okay. I hope I'm still there. Latin America, we got to look at Latin America. You know, we were supposed to be at 1.8. We really got hit in 2020, down 7.4. Now, the neat thing I like is that Bolivia was expected to be in 2019, 3.8. It only slipped to 3.5, but it's leading. It will lead, hopefully, the Latin America recovery at 5.6. So some great opportunities there. So that's one effect is, recession, global recession. The other one from my, and I think any entrepreneur's perspective should be the volatility that creates on the supply of money through the financial markets. And it's interesting to watch the financial markets around the world from the end of March 2020 to January is where I gathered my data, to the end of January 2021. So we have that, 8-9 month period, 10 months, I guess. And I look at the markets around the world. Well, Japan up 16.1%. China up 16.1%. A lot of volatility. I'd stay off that exchange. The Nikkei up 23%. The Dow only up 7%. And you say, why? Well, because the Dow only really has 30 stocks in it, and most of them are industrial manufacturing based old economies. The S&P, much broader, one of the biggest market capitalized exchanges in the world, up almost 30%. You get over to Europe again, as I said before, a little slow on the technology adoption curve. The FTSE out of London down 11.5%. The MIB out of Italy down 5.3%. But the savior to them all is where the FANGs live. And when I talk about FANGs, I'm talking about the Facebooks, the Amazons, the Alphabets, Facebook, Amazon, Alphabet, and Netflix, and Google, I used it twice there. The Apples and the Amazons, Google, Netflix, and Facebook. If you had invested in them last March, you would have had a 52% increase in valuations. Unbelievable. Now, why? Why would the tech stocks? And that's the type of thing I'm always asking myself, looking for opportunities. Well, COVID hit. So one of the first things we saw, people had to work from home. So they come home. If they couldn't bring the computer systems with them, then they had to buy new ones. They had to get connected through whatever connectivity was in their area, which wasn't most up to date. That was a huge expenditure. Education. Kids in North America, the majority of them are not able to attend school. So the kid has to come home. He doesn't have a computer. He doesn't have connectivity. You can't use mom or dad's because they're using it for work. So that created the home education was a tremendous boost to all the FANGs. And also then you have, people can't go to movies. They can't go out to nightclubs. So entertainment. So the rise of Netflix, the rise of, eating at home and having food delivered to the home for this special treat. So it's been quite a volatile ride. The only other thing that I think really affects, two more. Unemployment rates, we've seen a tremendous increase in Canada due to COVID, 5.5 to 7.5. The US went from 4% to 6%. Germany from 3.5 to 4.5%. God bless Bolivia, went from 3.5% unemployment to 3.45% unemployment. So whatever you're doing there, Brazil took a big jump from 11 to 14%. I also, because air travel has been, and travel and the whole tourism. So I looked at, numbers of tourism between 2019 and 2020. And I know it's a tremendous potential opportunity out there in Bolivia from what I've seen. Such a diverse country. It should be on your horizon. But I looked at Brazil, Greece, Italy, Thailand, France, Indonesia, Spain, and the US. They're the top 8 destinations. And you know what? I looked at graphs and they all follow the very, very same pattern, whether it be Indonesia or the US. Took from March, was going up a little bit and then started down, came way down by June. Then we thought the first round is over and there was a little rise and people started getting out, and that lasted until we realized, damn, we're into another round, and it fell right off and it continues down. Now there's a little uptick where, led by the Americans and their pent-up demand to get out and get going, and I think that's going to be a major, major, major problem. Okay, the last part of my talk I wanted on expectations, and I wanted to address it to the students out there looking within their own country at Bolivia. The UN has told us time and time again that 11% of the world, of humanity, suffers from chronic malnutrition, undernourishment. And I look at Bolivia and I look at the resources that an entrepreneur could undertake. Agriculture just jumps out at me. If you look at your overall employment in, not just in the farming, but the transportation, the communication, the industry of food, about 40% of your people are currently engaged in. There's a rich, rich divergence of products. You go from your Midlands there, you got your grains and soybeans, which you compete with me on. And by the way, your production levels are as high as Canada and the US. The east side of your country, you got wonderful fruits, sugarcane, pineapple. In the west, towards La Paz, you have your llama, which is an excellent source of high protein meat and soft leathers. You have sheep, and you have quinoa, which is, I think your #1 producer in the world, but you can add to that advantage. High protein, high fiber, what the rest of the world needs, and relatively cheap to produce. And, really, if you're looking at global waves of who your consumers are today, it really is the millennials, and it's the millennials that are very conscious of what foods they're eating. The problem is that you really have some pretty low technical practices. You have a limited infrastructure to get out to your rural areas, poor agricultural management, in that you're not rotating crops, you're continuing terrace farming, which leads to erosions, and you're overgrazing in the West on the lands that you do have. So we got a mental change there, from quantity to quality. I see tremendous opportunities in technical consulting, in transportation, storage of your foods, communications, and local educational services. So my top 7 picks for young entrepreneurs that are out there, I would say 2 aspects of agricultural consulting. First is basic business consulting skills. Talk about planning. Talk about the short term, the long term, the contingent plans that have to be made. Talk about the organization, finding that right balance of the resources that you have, although limited, can be brought in. Talk about the types of community leadership that's required to oversee those resources are meeting the contingent long-term and short-term goals that you set out. And then make sure you have that control aspect. Teach them about control. Did we overproduce? Did we underproduce? Did we not meet it? Why didn't we meet it? What the right balance of our resources should be. So I think there's some basic management consulting to the agricultural people. I see a tremendous opportunity in the transport, storage, and communication of agricultural. Some tutorial basic tech skills for the indigenous people and the farm people. Get them onto some basic flip phones even, that they have those communication. If you don't like the farming side, how about proofreading services? I see a lot of stuff comes to me from all around the world, and the proofreading is terrible because sometimes the few changes in words can mean a completely different, have a completely different meaning to the people that you're asking for help from. I see a tremendous opportunity in online course development. We won't lose this when we come through COVID-19. We'll still have a fairly big element of online courses needed. Now, interesting, McKinsey report came out last March 21st. They did a global sample of 8 countries, 2 in America, 3 in Europe, 3 in the Middle East and Asia. The average mark of effectiveness of virtual education was given 4.8 out of 10. So in other words, it's failing. So the improvement on what we're doing virtually in course development at all levels, primary, secondary, and university, is tremendous opportunity.
Sorry to interrupt, Dr. Hewick. We're about to end the conference because you're already 1 hour. It's too.
That's because I'm old and I'm slow.
It's 2 o'clock.
I don't have all these digital skills.
We need to move on to the next conference. I apologize. Please. If you would like to close it, please. And I think it has been a wonderful conference, full of data, full of statistics, and thank you very much.
You're quite welcome. Do I have 30 seconds or a minute to wrap up?
Absolutely. Okay. 2 or 3 minutes or 4.
Young people out there, thank you for staying with me. 5 things I want you to keep in mind as a prospective entrepreneur. Be perceptive, always look, and try to spot a need, and a need will lead to an opportunity. Be passionate with what you're going to do. Don't do it because it's a job, but do it because you love it. Learn to be persuasive. You're going to have to persuade a lot of people to try your product. Be willing to pivot at any time, because things are not always going to go like this. They're going to go like this. So be ready to pivot forward, backward, and be persistent. Never give up. Amen. Thank you all for the time I've had with you.
It's been wonderful. Thank you very much. I think we're going to have, luckily we're recording it, because we need to rewatch, to play it back again, so that we can learn about the rich statistics that you have provided us. Thank you very much for the opportunity to have you. I think all of us have been honored, and I hope that we can have you for some other time for a conference, a follow-up, if possible.
Of course we can. Take care. God bless all. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Goodbye. Muchas gracias. Gracias a todos. Vamos a ingresar a la próxima conferencia, por favor, así que los que están apuntados, cerramos esta, Vanita, gracias.